Okay, so we'll continue on Samach Bays, Omid Bays. We were kind of getting into the middle of this, so just want to back up a little bit. Th This whole sugya is complicated because of the nuances that we're discussing in the machlokes between Rabbah and Abaya, and we're going to see also Rava and Abaya, where the question arises based on what the Mishnah says, how do we interpret the language? For instance, Rabbah introduced to us a concept that is very important going forward, that there's an important distinction between a cash transaction and a debt transaction, meaning that if the transaction involving the giving of cash, then that's more recognizable, and therefore the chance of someone interpreting that to be ribis is far greater because they see cash changing. That's what people understand. A debt is a little bit more amorphous. It's not a mamoshes. It's not it's there, but it's not a mamoshes. It's not something that's tangible. Therefore, anything revolving around a debt may be less likely to appear as ribis, and therefore you won't be able to put your finger on it and say there's ribis. But with a cash situation, you'll be able to say that's ribis. So that was Rabba's chiddush. And Rabbah explains the whole Gemara that way. So Abaya asks a kasha on Rabbah, right? And he says to him, if you're going to tell me that the only reason why we're saying this is rib is because it's isuro, it's with a coin, right? But if it's not with a coin, then it's not ribis. Mari ain lo. So then, and this is we're approximately just repeating the line. A little above the midline in the Gemara. If you look on the Rashi side, you see the Rashi Yeshlo, right? When it says Rashi Yeshlo, a little bit below that, the Gemara says Amalei Abaya, right? So the question, so Abaya asks a kasha. If you're going to use a Rabbah's interpretation that all surrounds whether or not you exchanged the transaction was with cash, then my area ain't low. What difference is it? Because the Mishnah says that the reason why you can't fulfill the transaction where he exchanged the chitim for yayin, he wanted wine. So the borrower said, I have wine. Stay with me, and I will give you the worth of wine for 30 denarim, right? That was, but yayin ain't low. Because he didn't have wine, the transaction wasn't good. Frekta baya, what difference does it make if it's einlo? Afilu yeshlo, even if he has the wine, but the transaction was with a debt, not with coin, not with money, then it's also not a valid transaction because you have to have money. So Rabbi's chiddush that you have to have money throws a sort of a wrench into the lashon of the Gemara, which says that the only reason why in that exchange that we talked about several times in the past, where he was exchanging grain for wine, there would be a perfectly good transaction as long as he had the wine in his possession. What difference does it make if he has the wine? If he's not using money, then it's not a transaction. So that was a bias kasha on Rabbah for him from interpreting that money is the ikr. Notice the cash itself, the money is the ikr.
So this makes a statement about verbal contract in effect. When you say things, how much power does it have?
Right. And so there's no question that a verbal contract under halacha can be acceptable. I mean, again, it's the question of having Adim and having other things. But even if it's not completely in writing, then it's valid. And here in the United States, it's interesting because many jurisdictions do not accept an oral contract to be a valid contract. There are some who do, Florida being one of them. But this is the difficulty is when you don't have it in writing and it's not continuous, it's not something you can actually ascertain. that it gives rise to a lot of problems. But here, even if you have an oral contract, the question is, how do we deal with this contract if we're not talking about money? Because the focal point of our discussion, according to Rabbah, is whether you have cash or not. So Abaya asks that kasha, right? So we'll pick up from here. Abaya asks that kasha, and Abaya says, no, I'm going to interpret the Gemara differently with sort of a different look. Ella Oma Abaya. So Abaya says has nothing to do at all with making a psika, what we call a psika d'shtora, meaning a contract for the future. But what is we talking about? Masnissen, our Mishnah, Kedetani Rav Safra, Beribis de Be Rav Chia. Rav Safra's interpretation of ribis as was learned in the yeshiva of Rav Chia. All right, so in the yeshiva of Rav Chia, they learned about ribis, and Rav Safra made a pronouncement. We'll see what the pronouncement, but it was important for the Gemara to say where this all happened. The Tanna Rav Sifra, Rav Safra, Beribis de Be Rav Chia, because Rav Safra made the following pronouncement about the Bryce in the yeshiva there, Yesh Dvorim Shehein Mitorin, that there are things that are totally mutter. In other words, no indication of ribis whatsoever. Va'asurin mipnei haramis ribis. So this gives rise to the question of maris ayin, right? We talk about maris ayin, that you shouldn't do things because it will appear to be something it's not. So this is akin to a maris ayin, and it's called haramis ribis, which is by definition, it's a it is a evading ribis. In other words, you do some sleight of hand in order for someone to say, "Oh, this isn't ribis." Ketzad. What's the example? Oma loy halveni mone. If a person says to his someone else, his friend, whoever, I need a money. I need $100. Oma lo. So the respective lender says to him, Mona ainli. I don't have $100, but chitin b'mona yeshli. But I have wheat worth 100. So what is he telling him? I can give you a loan of chitim b'mona, and then you do what you want with it. If you want, you need money. I don't have the money. Take the chitim and turn it into money. Right? That's what the case is about. That they learned. So she's chitin b'mona yeshli. I have chitin b'mona. Shani noisel which I will give you, and this is the loan. So he gave him $100 worth of chitin. All right, so now what did he do? It wasn't quite the way he said it, because otherwise he would have given him the money. But he gave him the chitin. The fellow went out and was looking to sell the chitin for money, because he needs money. So he comes back to the lender, and the lender says, you know what? I'll help you out. I will buy, a mana is 25 sloim. I'll buy it for 24 sloim. In other words, I'll give you 24 sloim cash, which is almost a mana, which is what you need, and I'll buy it back. So you'll ask yourself, does this smack of anything improper? Let me ask the question. Does this smack of anything improper? He lent him a money, 25 sloim. The fellow, in a form of goods, the fellow went on the market. He couldn't find prospective purchaser. Went back to the lender, and the lender says, "I'll give you 24 slom, a little bit less than what he lent him." Is that ribis or not? Says the
direction. Yeah.
What do you say, Jay?
It's in the wrong direction.
Right. So says the Gemara mutter. This is a permissible transaction. The also losses came ifnei haramis ribis, and you can't do it because of haramis ribis. Why is it a valid transaction? Why is it a valid transaction? And the reason is because when he sold him the chitim back for a mana, he was not repaying the debt. The debt still remains a mana. He was just doing a separate transaction of a sale. In other words, you can't mix the sale and the loan. He lent him a money, and then he bought back for a little less than a money, but he paid him cash. He gave him cash. So the loan is still extant. It's still there. He's got to pay him back. But for someone who's looking at this, they're going to say, wait a minute, that's sort of a sleight of hand. He just collected one seller of ribis because he lent him 100, right? And he got back 99, let's say. That's ribis. Says the Gemara, it's not ribis, but it looks like ribis. So,
But Rabbi, he lied to him. I mean, he said, I don't have.
right. Okay. So we're not going to focus on that because you're right. But maybe he came into money. I mean, we're not going to accuse him of doing something improper. We're just going to say that the guy went out, started searching, and the lender happened to come across some money. So he says, I can help you out. It wasn't with the intent of cheating him. It was, I can help you out. I just came into some money, but what I have to do is I'm going to buy it for 24 sloim. And the fellow said, for one seller, I'm not going to make a big deal. I need the money. So here, take it for 24 sloim. Maybe 24 sloim is the right market value. We don't know that. So you can't. So it looks like ribis, but we're mixing and matching a loan and a sale, and a buyer says you can't do that. So that's a buyer's interpretation of our Gemara, and we're going to see now it's going to play out. We're going to understand what this means for our Gemara. That was that discussion that Abaye said that Safra introduced this chiddush that what that there is no ribis when you mix a loan with a sale, but it's haramis ribis. That's why you shouldn't do it. But remember, this is only midrabanan. We're talking. This is not a issa deraisa. It's midrabanan. So it looks like ribis. So okay, fine. But we say midrabanan. If you do the transaction, you don't have to undo it. That's the halacha, right? Because it's a issa derabanan, which we don't. Again, we don't want you to do it. But once it's done, it's done. It's not like a raisa, the deraisa, which has to be returned. So that's a bias chiddush, and it's an interesting chiddush because to the trained eye, it might look like, the untrained eye, rather, it might look like ribis. So he says, no, it's not ribis. Now, so Abaye completely slugs up Rabba's concept of money, not money. It has nothing to do with money. It's nothing to do with whether or not you're paying cash or a debt. It has to do with haramis ribis, and you shouldn't do something because it appears to be ribis, even though in actuality it's not. Now, we're going to explain the Gemara, okay? Hochinami. So Rabbi is now saying, in our case, what was our case? Our case was going to Omar Halveni Shloshim Dinarim. Okay, Reuven came to Shimon and said, please lend me 30 dinarim. I need 30 dinarim for something. Omalei Shloshim Dinarim Ainli, right? Very similar to the case of Rav Safra. I don't have 30 dinarim. What do I have? Chitin b'shlosha dinarim yeshli. I happen to have a lot of wheat, and I'll give you wheat worth 30 dinarim, shani nosen l'cha, which I'll give you, right? Nosen lo chitin b'shloshim. He then gave him chitin b'shloshim, and the borrower can do what he wants with it. I mean, theoretically, he can transact for the 30 for the chitim, sell it, whatever he wants to do, right? Very similar to what we just said in Rosh Safra. So he gave him chitin b'shloshim. The Chazar, Lekachtem Hamenu, same case. He came back and he bought it back from him, right? Bedinar Zohov, for a dinar Zohov, in other words, a gold dinar, which translates into silver dinarim, but it's 25 silver dinarim, not 30. So we have a case where he's buying it back, just like Rav Safra's case, he's buying it back for less than the full value of what he lent him, right? Now, the Malva then still comes to the lover and says, you owe me 30. That hasn't changed. So he says, you have to give me back the 30. Okay, that was the scenario. Then the Gemara on that said, no, okay, I want my 30 dinar back because I want to buy yayin, says the lender. I want to buy yayin. I want to buy yayin of 30. What does the borrower said to him? Okay, I have wine. I will give you the credit for 30 dinarim, right? 30 dinarim, and you'll get and buy me the wine. Okay, so that's the setting of what the Gemara is telling us. And the reason why there's a hesitation in doing it is because it's haramas ribis, because it looks like some kind of a ribis transaction, and it's not. Why? Because he lent him and he bought back. Just like Rav Safra's case where he lent him and then he bought back. Our Gemara is also telling about lending and buying back. So that's how Abaya interprets our Gemara, our Mishnah. Right. So we're going to ask a kasha in a minute on the question of Yeshlo and Ein Lo, but let's hold off. Okay. So now, if the borrower has wine, do Yavishle, Bishloshim dinner, you give him the wine for 30 dinner because he owes him 30 dinner. That's the amount of the value of the chitin, right? So what is going on? Peiruhu dikvar shakel, that he's taking peiruhu de shakel minei, because Paris is what he is dealing with, and Paris is what he should pay, right? The less lamba. And that's no problem because why? We're dealing in the same sort of arena. So therefore, you're substituting 30 for chitin, for 30 for yayin. Okay. But less lamba. Ve'i lo, and that's only if he has it present. But ve'i lo, what? Our case says ve'i lo, then it doesn't work. Even the less lechamra, vadai, mishkel, zuzimine. So if he doesn't have the payers, remember, in bartering food or different produce, it's very hard for the untrained eye. We would look at this transaction. Why would we understand it's ribis? He's giving him wheat, he's giving him payers, he's a yayin, back and forth. There is no consistency of why we would say it's ribis. So if the wine is in his possession, not a problem. But since he doesn't have wine, vadai mishkel zuzimine, so how is he going to get paid? He'll get paid in money. He'll actually have to give him money. Mechse karibis. So Abaya says, if he doesn't have the wine and the fellow's demanding wine, then he's somehow going to have to find money to give him because he doesn't have wine. Maybe he'll borrow it from another source. We don't know. It doesn't matter. So I'll have to actually give the fellow, the creditor, the lender, money. Now, once you get money, that's a problem. Not because money is better than debt. It's because the whole issue has to do with how ramas ribis, and it looks like ribis. So he's focusing on not on the fact that it's money, but even though it's the same language, in other words, product versus money. So according to Rabbah, that was the chiddush that money was a ribis problem. Product is not a ribis problem. Abaya comes and says, no, has nothing to do with the fact that it's the money. It has to do with the fact that it appears to be ribis because it's easier to decipher ribis from money than it is from payers. So that's how he learns pshat. Right? That's how he learns pshat. And therefore, according to Baya, there is a difference between yesh lo and ein lo. According to Rabbah, there's no difference between yesh lo and ein lo because it's all dependent on money, not on product. But according to Baya, it is a difference between yesh lo and ein lo because if it's yesh lo, then it's perfectly fine. But if it's ein lo, if he doesn't have, then he's going to have to give him money in lieu of the product. And that already gives rise to aromas ribis. That gives rise to the appearance of ribis. So it's kind of a subtle difference between Rabbah and Abaya, but the point being is what's the focal point? Is the focal point money versus produce? In both cases, there was money and produce. We're not positing a different case. In both cases, it's money and produce, except the emphasis according to Rabbah, is that the money creates ribis and not the produce. And according to Abaya, the money produces haramas ribis. haramas ribbis, not the payers, because the payers you can't tell whether it's ribbis. But once a guy gets money, because again, that's the coin of the realm. That's what everybody understands. We understand money. Most people don't understand a big transaction, wheat for wine or wheat. Now you're getting beyond my scope here. What does that all mean? But when people trade money, everybody understands money, and that's why again the emphasis on Rabbah being that Ein Lo, he doesn't, there's no money. And according to Baya, it's not about so much the money, but what it gives rise to aromas ribis. Okay, so now that's maybe a little clearer way of understanding the machlokes between Rabbah and Abaya. Okay, now, so now that Abaya slugs up Rabbah, and he just gave us an explanation of what our Mishnah is talking about, Omalei Rava, not Rabbah, Rava comes along and he wants to question how does Abaya understand our Mishnah? Okay, so this is his kasha. And again, this is where we're really getting into the subtleties of the words of the Mishnah. Very, very, you go over this and you say, okay, what is he really saying? So listen to this. Ihochi, if you use Abaya's interpretation of Aramis Ribis, and that's the reason why you can't make this, Tainli Chiti, the language in the Mishnah was that the lender went to the buyer and says, give me my wheat. Okay, give me my wheat. The Mechiti Maboyale, it should have said, give me the value of my wheat. In other words, the lender doesn't want wheat. He's not a wheat merchant. He wants money. So when he said, give me my wheat for 30 denarim, of which the borrower said, I'll give you wine, that's the wrong terminology, says the Gemara, because it's not wheat that he wants, it's demei chiti. So in other words, he wants to slug up Abaya's interpretation just by the language of the Mishnah, that how do you interpret the language of the Mishnah when it says, give me chitim, when it should give me money, the value of chitim, which is what I want. So what does Abaya do? Abaya says, Tana de Bechiti. He immediately backs down. And he says, no, the Brisa meant, the Mishnah meant the Mechiti. But you see from the subtlety of the language that it appears that there's a problem with Abaya's interpretation. So Abaya immediately wants to conform, and he says, you're right, that it's not chitim he wants, but it's demei chiti. So that's what I'm going to. That's what the Mishnah is actually saying. Okay, we've had that before, where when the Akasha is asked, we have to go back and we have to amend the language in order to conform with the correct interpretation. So that's what Abaya does. He says, no problem. We're talking about demei chiti. So that was the first kasha that Rava asked. Rava is trying to slug up Abaya in support of Rabbah. That's what's going on here. So Rava asked him a question. How, according to your interpretation, what do you do? Answer: no problem. I'm going to change the lashon of the Mishnah. Now, what's the next? He asked him another kasha. Shani mochrin. What happened in the case of the Mishnah? In the case of the Mishnah, he claims his wheat. Why? Because he wants to sell it to get yayin, right? So you have to give it back to me. So now that we see you have to give me back the money to buy yayin. Shani mokrin, because I want to sell it so that I can get yayin, right?
Is this meant to be a theoretical case?
Back
and forth.
You know what it is, Jay? It's the Gemara showing us how meticulous you have to be with the lashon. That when the Mishnah, now in the Torah, we know that every word of the Torah has tremendous meaning, and you have to really get into the depth of the meaning. What the Gemara here is saying is the flow of the lashon also has, just like in the Torah, it has importance. If this was the way the Mishnah was presented, then we have to understand it as such. And if there's a gap in what the Mishnah is saying, then that's a problem. We can't just smooth it over. Oh, no. Okay, fine, not a problem. It is a problem. So in order to undo the problem, you got to change the lashon. You can't just say with this lashon, leave it alone. You got to change the lashon. And Abai says, "I'm willing to change the lashon." You're correct. You're right. I have to say, not give me wheat, but give me demay. Give me the value of the wheat so that I can go ahead and buy wine. But now, so what did Abai do? Abai just changed the lashon and said that it's not the product, the produce, but it's the actual cash, the money that I want to go buy wine. So Rava asks, um, uh, okay, so what does the lender want the wine? Does he want to sell the wine? Then, in other words, are we interpreting the lender to say, I want wine so I can sell wine? It doesn't say that. Is that his intention? In other words, he wants to get back wine for the chitim. For what purpose? Right? Um, but if you're going to say that now we're using the word sell, right? Give me the value of my wheat. In other words, give me the value of my produce, then then uh, then the mission itself um, should say, should follow and say that the lender is saying, give me the value of the wheat that I can now sell the wine. That's not the lashon of the Mishnah. Again, we're being very, very strict to understand the language. That makes it a little bit complicated, because from the lashon of this Mishnah, I don't understand Abaya's answer. Says Rava. Rava's saying that I don't understand Abaya's answer. Okay, he changed the lashon of the Mishnah from requesting the wheat to requesting the actual the value of the wine, meaning the money. But now, if that's what he's requesting, where do we see it in the lashon of the Mishnah? It should have said shemachartim. It should have said that I want you to repay me so that I can sell, that I'm able to sell the wine, which the Mishnah doesn't say. So Abaya has to secondly amend the Mishnah, right? Then he says, Tana shemachartim lach, right? Now he says, he enunciates, okay, not just the value of the wheat, of the chitim that he started out with, but now he says, I'm changing the lashon, shemachartim lach, meaning the value of the wheat, so that I can now sell, It's the same kasha. He's asking him, it's not clear from what you're saying that that's what you mean, right? So Abaye gives the teretz, and he says, okay, I'm going to change the lashon again, and I'm going to say, Tana shemachartim lecha, that the Mishnah should say not the value of the wheat, but not the transaction, but give him the value of what he sold him. So the word machartim now is an important addition to the Mishnah. That's the second kasha. Now Rava has another kasha on Abaye. Again, what we're talking about here is, that's what makes it, we're talking about the nuances of the lashon. It doesn't change what the Mishnah is talking about in total, but it's the nuances of the lashon that we're trying to be very exact. And to your point, Jay, the language matters. In other words, having a precise language in the Mishnah is as important as having it in the Torah, because you have to understand what he's saying. So Rava asks, Hari chitin osiyas alai bishloshim dinrin. The Mishnah says that when the borrower gets the borrower now goes to the lender, and he says the value of the wheat is 30 denarim, and that's what I'll give you. So according to
That's his payback. He's discussing the payback stage.
The payback stage, exactly right. So Rava asks, you're discussing the payback stage, but that was the Havamina in the beginning. Why are you telling me now? You're giving me something, Chiddush, that he's going to pay him back. That's exactly what they had discussed in the very beginning. So why is it, in other words, according to Abaye, what's the Chiddush here, right? Um, you're going to say, Shemachartim loch, and I'm saying to you that that was what we agreed to in the very beginning. Mikaranami hachok mina, that's the way it would be. So again, he wants to show a flaw in Abaya's learning of the Mishnah because the lashon doesn't comport, the language doesn't comport to exactly what we're trying to say. So now, having asked these questions and backing Abaye into a corner, and Abaye is trying to answer each question, each barrage of questions with amending the lashon of the Mishnah. Finally, Abaye says no. Okay, let's move away from that, and we're going to look at the Mishnah differently. Hacha kamale. This is the transaction. Okay, let's recast the words of the transaction. This is what the lashon between the lender and the buyer was. Okay, b'dmei chitecha she'osi salah b'shlosh dinar. In other words, for the demei, for the value of the chitin that you turned into a loan. In other words, he originally gave him a loan, and he says it's okay. This loan is worth 30 dinarim of the chitin. So the now the borrower says b'demei chatecho she'osi solai b'shloshim dinar, for the value of the loan that you made me for 30 dinar, etzli behen yayin. Now you say you want to get a repayment, so you have by me a credit of 30 dinarim of wine, v'yayin ein lo, but he doesn't have the wine. So the interpretation now is a little bit different than what we started out with, because he's saying to him that from the very beginning, you gave me a loan of 30 dinarim for a product, and now you want a different product, and I don't have the product, right?
Who's saying who says I don't have the wine? The borrower?
The borrower, because the lender wants now wine. He says, you owe me 30 dinar, pay it to me in wine. So the borrower says to me, yain ainli, I don't have the wine to give you to be able to pay. If he had the wine, it wouldn't be a problem. But because he doesn't have the wine,
he still has the chitim.
He still has the chitim.
And he wasn't able to sell it.
Right, but not able to sell it. And meantime, the lender who's owed this debt says, "What good is the chitim to me? For whatever reason, I need wine now. I don't need
not
chitim.
Buying back the chitim, right?
Not buying back the chitim, right? No,
but the earlier scenario is obsolete. He's not buying back the wheat.
That's correct, right? So that's a different situation, right? That's what we're saying now. It's a different situation. So now the yain ein lo, and he doesn't have wine. So if he doesn't have wine, then so the question is, so what's he going to pay him? What is he going to give him? He doesn't have the wine. So that's the scenario. Now that was different from what
he doesn't. So the lender doesn't want the wheat back. He also he really wants wine, and then the borrower doesn't have wine to pay.
He doesn't have wine to pay. So that's now the lashon of the Mishnah. Okay, so we've recast the lashon of the Mishnah to this. Okay, now having said that, now Rava's kasha is v'habedinazov hakur v'chen hashar katani. So what does the Gemara say? Or what does the Mishnah say? Remember, we talked about the shar. The shar means that's the established price in the marketplace, which is one of the criterion to avoid ribis. Hashar is an important concept here. So the Mishnah says, right, that he gave him he bought the wheat for a dinar, a gold dinar zov. And that was the market price, right?
That's the loan that he
Right,
loaned.
right. So, but Abaya in this interpretation, and remember, a gold dinar is 25. A gold dinar is 25 silver dinarim, right? So, um,
Yeah.
Abaya is talking about a case where the chitim was not a gold dinner, but it was 30 sloim, 30 dinner, 30 silver dinner. So now we have a description. So this is what Rav is asking again in the nuance. If Abai is now reinterpreting what the Mishnah is saying, then how does that comport with the actual lashon of the Mishnah, which talks about 30 dinarim and not one dinar zahav? So again, he wants to ask a kasha on the way Abaya interprets the language. How does it fit with Abaya? This is all about fitting the language into the discussion. And if there's a slight nuance in the language, then Rava jumps on him and says, Rava's trying to defend Rabba and go back to the whole money concept, that it's money, not debt. And Abaya said, Haramas ribis. Wait a minute. No, no, no. It has nothing to do with that because the lashon of the Mishnah doesn't comport with what you're saying. So he went through these different questions, and we kind of answered them, and that Abaya backed down and said, "That's what I really am saying." So there's no inconsistency. But now that the Mishnah is talking about a dinar zohov, right? V'chein hashar, and Abaya is talking about. So what was the shar? Was the shar 25 or was the shar 30? So according to the Mishnah, the shar, the market price was a dinner, Zahav, which is 25. But Abaya's case wasn't about 25. Abaya's case was about 30 dinner. So once again, he's slugging up Abaya and saying, Abaya, when you're not consistent, and when you're not consistent in the lashon, therefore, what you're saying doesn't comport with the Mishnah. So you can't be the one who's going to interpret the Mishnah because the Mishnah is talking about dinner zov, and you're talking about shloisha dinner kesef. You're talking about the 30 kesef dinner, which is a different concept. So again, how do you understand Abaya, right? So therefore, at the end of the day, Rava comes along and and he says, no, I have a different concept. So remember, we started with Rabba, then we came to Abaya. Abaya is being slugged up by Rava, and now Rava says, this is my approach. He has a novel approach. Elo Omar Rava. Rava comes and says, Kishachinte Rabbi Oshia Nafik Lavosi. Very, when I'll die, then Rabbi Oshia is going to come to my Levaya, right? In other words, what he's trying to say is that I'm a big supporter of Rav Oshia. We'll see what Rav Oshia says. And therefore, I'm right because you see, Rav Oshia is going to come to my Levaya. He's going to say, Rava, you're right. What is he coming to say? Right? Says the Gemara.
I missed what you said about Vahod Bedinar Zahav Hakor B'chein Hasha'ar Katane.
Say it again.
I missed what you said about the
Kasha on Abaya.
Bedinar Zahav Hakor B'chein Hasha'ar Katane.
Right. So Rava is interpreting that's our Mishnah is talking about a dinar zav, that was the shar. What does it mean? It was the shar. It means that the market price for the wheat was 25 dinar. A dinar zav is equal to 25 silver dinar. So that's our case. But Abaya wants to interpret the case as being 30 dinar.
Back
So
at 30 number, yeah.
30, right?
In the
He said
beginning.
shloshim dinar. So there's an inconsistency between what the Mishnah is talking about and what Abaya is talking about. Remember, Rava is trying to find some daylight here why the interpretation of Abaya can't be the right interpretation of the Mishnah. So he asks certain questions, and Abaya backs down and says, "You're right, you're right, you're right. The lashon is not what I say. This is the correct lashon." But finally, Rava asks the kasha that Abaye can't answer. He's saying to him, "You're telling me that you Abaye's case is about 30 dinner. The Mishnah talks about 25 dinner and the shar. The shar becomes important because that's now the market price. 25 silver dinner, one core, one dinner's off. And so you're talking about 30 and we're talking about 25. You can't have it both ways. So that's his kasha on Abaye. So then Rava now wants to give a different interpretation, and he's saying, remember, Abaya's interpretation had to do with haramas ribis. So that's the whole point here is that he is saying it's haramas ribis. Now Rava doesn't want to hold to that. Abaya said it was kesef. I'm sorry, Rabba, and Abaye is coming and saying it's haramas ribis. No. So Rava now wants to slug up Abaya and wants to say, no, this is the way you have to learn it. What is he saying? Um, so he's saying that this is the way you have to mitzvah masnis and kavose like Rav Oshia, the Tanur of Oshia. So now let's learn what Rav Oshia says, because this now becomes Rava's sort of guiding post. Rav Oshia says, so listen to the scenario. It's a little different scenario. A person lent a money, I'll say $100 to his to chaver, and he owes him a money. Now he wants to collect. V'holach v'omed al garno. So the borrower was a grain merchant. So the seller came to the threshing floor, right? He went to the source of his parnasa, v'omed al garono, and v'omar, and he said to him, Tain li ma'asi, give me my money. She'ani roitze likach behen chitin. I want to buy chitin. So, I mean, it's an obvious answer, but I'm standing on your threshing floor. You thresh wheat. I want to buy your wheat, but you owe me $100. So what? How do I get from here to there, right? Tain li ma'asi, so to speak, give me my money that I can buy the chitim from you, right? V'omalo, and the borrower says, chitim yeshli shanoisen lecha. You want to buy wheat? No problem. I have wheat right here on the threshing floor. Tzei v'asen alai b'shar shel achshav. So he's saying to him, the borrower says to the lender, the money that I owe you, you'll buy wheat at the shar. Okay? I don't know what the shar is. I don't know what the prevailing price of wheat is, but
Rabbi, this art scroll says that the debtor is saying these words, chitim yeshli.
yeah, the debtor is the borrower. The debtor is the borrower.
Yeah, right.
And the borrower owns the chitim, the chitim, the threshing floor.
Right.
But so the lender lent him $100. Fine. Now he's coming back to the borrower and says, you know what? I need my money because I have to buy wheat. So the borrower says, you came to the right place. I have wheat. I'll sell you the wheat. How much wheat will I sell you? I don't know. Let's go out into the marketplace and see what the shar is on wheat today. Right? Today is Shiva Asa B'Tammuz. You want to buy wheat. I don't know what the price of wheat is today, right? It fluctuates. So he's telling the seller, let's go out, see what the price of wheat is, and then your money will convert into wheat. Right? That's our scenario.
But is he trying to pay back the debt in the same exchange?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. In other words, I owe you $100 a month, and I'm
Right.
going to pay you back. But you're telling me you want wheat, so I'll pay
We'll
you back.
go together to the market.
That's right. We'll go together, figure out how much the wheat is, and then I'll give you the wheat according to the money that you lent me.
So I'll pay for the wheat, and you'll take the wheat and go
You'll
home,
take the wheat, and we'll be even.
and then I've paid back my
I
loan.
pay back my loan. Correct. That's Rav Oshia's scenario. Okay, same as like kashash al achshav. So we go out and find out what the price is. Amalo. Okay, so now he is man chitim limchor. Okay, so he said fine. The lender said fine. I'm good with that. He is man chitim limchor. Now the time. So he bought wheat, but he didn't buy wheat to eat. He was a speculator. He was a stock speculator. He bought the wheat in order to store the wheat so that he could resell the wheat at a better price
Later, yeah.
later.
Mm.
So now he is man chitin limchor. Now the price of wheat has changed because whatever, there wasn't enough wheat around. So now he wants to capitalize on his purchase. Because remember, he bought wheat according to the Shiur back then. Omalo, so the lender says to the borrower who owns the wheat, Ten li chitin, give me my wheat. Then he wrote to the machron because I want to sell it. V'likach behen yayin. Now I see a opportunity to jump into the wine business. Now that I'm going to make a profit on the wheat business, so sell me my you have to sell me back my wheat. And so give me the money for the wheat, whatever the share was, and I'm going to buy wine. Now, wine obviously probably was at a lower price at the time, so he could stock up on the wine. Omar lo, so the borrower said to him, Yesh li yayin shani noisin lecha. I have wine, and we can make a transaction for the value of the wheat. Remember, the wheat has gone up in value because
Right.
we're talking about where he speculated and the wheat went up in value. So the wheat went up in value. He says, now let me buy wine. And the borrower says, I have wine. Save asen alai kishar shel achshav. So he says to him the same thing. Okay, you're going to pay me back. How much are you going to pay me back? What's the value of the market price of wine right now? That's the amount you're going to give me back in trade for the chitim that I bought. Now, mind you, this is all escalating in price, which theoretically is ribis because he is capitalizing every single time on the transaction. It's going up and up and up. So he's making a lot more. The money that he bought in the beginning, he's making a lot more money now because he's speculating. That appears to be ribis. So the Gemara says, so he says, he says, okay, fine. He is man yain limkor. Same scenario. This is Rav Oshia's Mishnah. The same scenario. Now he wants to sell the wine because the price of wine has gone up. He doesn't need the wine, but now that the market price for wine has gone up, so he says, "Give me my wine so I can sell it." Tenli yaini, give me my wine. Shani writes boy shemen. Now I want to go into the oil business. I want shemen. All right. This is not at all the case we've had until now. It's a continuum where he wants to constantly trade up his produce for something that's increased in value. So now he says, "Give me my the wine, the value of the wine, so I can buy shemen." So what does the borrower say? Same thing. Say v'aseh kashash al let's go and get the shar, the marketplace for the yayin, which was different than what it was before. So now this is okay. Here, that's the case. So now the Gemara is saying, "Kulam." All of these instances of Rabbi Yosha, im yesh loy mutter. If he has the product in hand, then it's all permissible. In other words, we can go through this series, right? Um, the borrower is allowed to take the debt and translate it into something that is worth more, as long as yeshlo, as long as yeshlo. Ain low, but if he keeps trading up and the borrower says, I'll give you, but he doesn't have to give him, then the Gemara says, okay, so in Rav Oshia's scenario, that's ribis, right? So in other words, according to Rav Oshia, this sounds like Rabbah to a degree, because we're saying that you can trade forward, right? You can actually trade forward but only when there is the yesh lo. Remember, we talked in the beginning that there was another exemption to ribbis. What's that exemption? Yesh lo. Why is yesh lo an exemption? Because we theorize that since he has it, even though he's not giving it to him, it's as if the fellow bought the product and is storing it by the borrower, and therefore prices increases belong to him. You're just holding my product. You're a shomer. Let's go. Well, you're just holding it. So it's not a ribbis gain. I'm a very smart businessman, and I keep trading up, and I keep buying product that goes up in price. Why is that ribbis? It just shows my savvy in terms of business, which is not ribbis. So therefore, Rava says that that's the scenario why yesh lo is okay and ein lo is usher, because when it's ein lo, um,
But Ainlow could mean that he has credit with the one that he's sort of dealing with, even though he doesn't have the product in his warehouse.
right. But the trick is the reason why
The real-
the yesh lo works because you could transfer ownership here of the product from the borrower to the seller. Once you can trace ownership to the seller, it doesn't matter what the value is. The value can skyrocket, and it's not ribbis
So
because he's improving on his own product.
in today's world, you can do all of this with money, different kinds of currency in different countries. So you're switching things around. You're borrowing $100 in American dollars, and you're trading with I'll pay you back in shekels, and then it gets back to, well, I'll use the European money, and and
Right.
that's what trade is. It's a regular business of making money on that small margin of the
Correct.
different values that go on every day.
Right. That's what the money traders do. Exactly right. So,
So
and
it's not considered ribbis if you're a money trader. It's considered your job. I mean, it's your business.
right, because there you're selling, not lending, Jay. That's a big difference. You're not, a money trader doesn't lend money, he sells money. In selling, then when
But
you
he also might lend to another money trader.
well, okay, but Yeshlo, if he's lending to another money trader and he has the goods in his possession, then that's an exemption from ribbis. You're right. He can do that with another money lender, but only not on credit, but on the fact that he has the money. So again, the interpretation, the reason why Yeshlo works is because we are transferring ownership from the
Yeah,
borrower to the lender.
it's a
And it's the
regular
lender who's going to be
transfer.
over ribbis, and
It has to
therefore
be a
when he owns it, it's no ribbis, right?
so
But
it has to
Rabbi,
be an actual transfer.
Or a
That's
theoretical
right.
transfer because he has it in his possession. Yeah,
Right.
but Rabbi, take the parallel case. So he's a savvy. The borrower is a savvy businessman who has connections in all these and has a lineup um
products. Yeah.
of not product, but he has brokers that deal in this so he can get a favorable price.
Okay.
So it's ain low because he doesn't have it,
Right.
but he has the connection
Right.
to be able to get whatever he needs when he wants it. What's the difference between yesh low and ain low if he can do the same thing in an ain low scenario?
Right. We did talk about that. We did talk about that, and um, this, so that introduces the question of if yesh lo lechaver, in other words, he has someone who can front him that product, then it should be as if he had the product, right? That's what you're
But
saying.
it's not yesh low because he doesn't have the product yet. It's an ain low because somebody else has it, but he can get it. He has
Right. So,
access to it.
so in that's
So
in that's
is that still considered a yesh low or is that
yeah.
an ain low?
Yes. So we arguably that's also yesh lo because he has access to it as if it was his. And you're saying that it's not his, it belongs to a broker buddy of his. But that broker buddy of his would forward it to him if he said, I need that.
Yeah, but how do you make the distinction when he does and when he doesn't have it?
Because in most cases, especially with a broker is going out into the market, he's looking at the whole marketplace of what he can buy, and he doesn't have like a preferred broker that he goes to and says, give me this product. He wants if a competitor has a better price, he'll get it for a better price. He's not going to go.
I totally agree. But the argument of Yeshlo versus Ainlo, I mean, you're saying because he has access, it's Yeshlo, but he doesn't actually have it. So
He
that's
has the potential of it. Yeah, he has the potential of having the access.
so that is a Yeshlo. And I'm saying if you're adjudicating that, how do you determine whether he has that access or he doesn't have that?
Okay, so that now we have to. You're right. So we have to define. He has to explain. He has to explain it. He says he'll come before the Bezdin, and they're gonna say, "Oh, you violated the halacha." I didn't violate the halacha of ribis. I had it, but you didn't have it. It wasn't there. He says, "Yes, but I had it because the other fellow who would give it to me has it. So it's as if I had it." So those we're extrapolating and extending the yeshlo from his physical possession to his theoretical possession, which he says there's unqualified access. I'm not going to go out in the marketplace and forage and figure out who has it. I know who has it, and I know he'll give it to me.
It's one phone call away.
One phone call away.
So,
Exactly.
Rabbi, what I'm troubled by is if the borrower is fine with this situation, like in this situation, somebody comes along and says this is ribis. So are we worried about the borrower taking it to Basin and said this is, I got schnookered. It's a ribis situation because in this situation that we just discussed, when you have brokers on call, the party may not get the deal he wants. He can go in and say this is ribis. I mean, he can say, I got shafted when it's really not. It's a matter of what he represented versus what reality was.
Right. So if he has, so the question is, how does he prove it? In other words, how does he show that yeshlo that he has it, and therefore it's not ribis?
But does that mean that somebody's going to come and allege that he has ribis, so he has to defend
No,
himself?
no, no, not that he has ribis, not that he has ribis.
That he's done this under under a ribis situation. I mean, if he doesn't complain about it, who's going to do that?
No, but we're saying not a question of complaining. We're saying that people looking at the transaction are going to say something is funny here because there's a halacha against ribis, and this fellow is constantly benefiting from the exchange, which the Rabbanan say is ribis. Midrabanan, it's ribis in a business transaction because there's an exchange of product and a constant higher valuation of the product. So that's our problem.
You got really savvy business people here who know how to play the system.
So you hit it, Michael. What's the difference between a savvy business person and a person paying ribis?
Right.
Right now we have to slice that and say he was a savvy business person. He didn't pay ribis. That's exactly the point. So he's trying to say if it's yeshlo, then there's no question that it's not ribis. But according to Rava's interpretation now of our Mishnah, he's saying, but if it's a debt, not because of the way Rabbah interprets it that cash is king, it's because the debt, if it's cash, then there's no question that it's his. But if it's a debt, then and he doesn't have it, then it's really ribis. So that's what Rava wants to be mechadish, is that in the case where the transaction didn't have yeshlo, and I'm not talking. Remember, yeshlo. We'll talk about. Can you extrapolate yeshlo not into physical possession, but ability to acquire it. If I have immediate ability to acquire it, that's yeshlo. I have it, even if I don't have it, but I have it. But now Rava in Rav Oshia is explaining to us why Yeshlo and Einlo are extremely important, because if you Einlo, if you don't have it, then it's ribis. I'm not talking about where you can get it from someone else's source. I'm just talking about physical possession. Does he physically possess it? So if he doesn't physically possess it, it's Einlo. And if it's Einlo, then it looks like ribis. So that's Rava's interpretation. Um, That's Rava's interpretation. Okay, so let's just conclude this one line here. Now, umay lokach, what does it mean when it says that he bought it? Right, just like we had a kasha on Abaya on the language, we have a kasha on Rava on the language. What does it mean that he bought it? Right, what does it mean? It says lokach b'halvaso. He bought it for the halva. So what it means to say is that since he owed him um, uh, in the very beginning, he never paid money, right? He bought it with a debt. So because the whole transaction started out with a debt, right? So he says he bought the shemen or the wine for the debt that he was owed. So that clarifies why Rava's position has accuracy, because remember, just like in Abaye, we ask kashas on the language doesn't fit. How does it fit with Rava? So he's saying it fits with Rava because Rava also means that that when he bought it, what does it mean he bought it? He didn't physically buy it. He bought it with the debt, with the original amount that he had the debt. So that's, for purposes of the language, that's sufficient for us to understand what he means, right? So that's what, okay. So, all right. So that's now the machlokes between Rabba's interpretation, Abaya's interpretation, and Rava's interpretation. So now the Gemara is going to conclude here and say, so what is Rava Mechadish? Right? What is Rava telling us? So the Gemara says he's telling us three things. Shma mina min Rav Osha talas. I learned from Rav Osha's the scenario we gave with where he constantly traded up from product to product. I learned three things. Shma mina mamida malva al gabe Paris. So the first thing I learned is that the basic halacha that I can take a loan, right? I can take a loan and make it into a halva of I can take a loan of money and turn it into a loan of a product, Paris. Okay, that's what I learned. That itself is not the chiddush because we know that from before. But he said, this is what I learned from Rav Oshia, that I lend you a money, and I can say, don't pay me back in a money, pay me back with chitin. Okay, velo omrina the lo b'yisura habol. And as a result of that, we do not say that he needs, like Rabba's interpretation, that he needs an isser, that he needs a hard cash. Even without hard cash, it has cheshivas. According to Rabba, if you don't have cash, then it's ribis. So he's saying that I can actually make a loan of money into a debt of product, and it's not considered ribis, even though no money traded hands. So that's really a slight on Rabbah, because according to Rabbah, you can't do that. You can only transact if there is a monetary transaction. And here there's no monetary transaction because he converted the money into goods. So that's one thing he learned. Shmamina, and he learned from Rav Oshia the Yeshlo. Okay. And this is what we said in the beginning. Remember in the beginning when we learned the Mishnah, this is the source. This is now the Gemara that supplies that there is an exception of Yeshlo, that when there is when he has the coverage for the debt because he has the product, then you can convert it from money to a product because you have product. Ushmamina isa Rabbi Yanai, and the third thing I learned is from Rav Oshia is that he holds like Rav Yanai. De Omer Rav Yanai. What did Rav Yanai say? Mali hain, mali de mayhem. So Rav Yanai made. So what Rav Yanai said is, what's the difference between mali hain delivering the chitim or the prod or the peiros, mali de mayhem. Or giving money. In other words, so Rav Yanai went even so far as to say there is no distinction. We're trying to say, oh, there's a distinction. How are we going to comport money with product? He says, no, forget about it. From the very outset, Rav Yanai says there's no difference between giving the money or the value of the money. So there was never a kasha. Oh, wait a minute. You can't pay with the debt. You have to have money like Rabba, or this haramas ribis. So therefore you can't do the deal like a buyer. No, from the very outset we're saying that there is no difference between money and product. Therefore these questions never come up. So it's never ribis. It's never ribis because whether you lend in money or you lend in product or you exchange, it's hainu hach. It's all the same. So that's what Rav Yanai was machadish, and Rav is saying I learned that way. That's the way I interpret all of these gemaras. That there's no difference between hain and demehen, between the one and the other. So that concludes this discussion, which is very complicated because we really trying to understand the nuances of what is ribis and what is not ribis, and it seems like there are different shitas on how you interpret ribis. So at the end of the day, Rava wants to consolidate all of this and says, no, there's no difference between money and product. In all cases, it's not even haramas ribis. In other words, the bystander, that was our problem, was that it looked like ribis. According to, if you take Rabbi Yanai's pronouncement, then everybody knows that even what looks like ribis isn't ribis because it's perfectly acceptable. So that's what Rabbi Yanai's kiddush was. Otherwise, people would sort of feel, oh, there's something untoward going on here, and how do I deal with it? So that's how Rava comes to conclude. And so we'll have to go back, Mishnah, next week and go through some of the Rashis. But this is the essence of the question of whether or not from Yeshlo or Einlo, he's saying no, Yeshlo Einlo has nothing to do with it here because whether he has it or doesn't have it, it's as if he had it. Money and product are one and the same. So if he has the money, he has the money. If he has the product, he has the product. And we don't distinguish between them to say that there should be a chilik between Yeshlo and Einlo. So that's how the Gemara concludes. And all right, so Mitzvah Shem, again, now